In the powerful kingdom of Zambura, the throne has always belonged to kings, never queens. But when Queen Nyah ascends after her father's death, she shatters tradition, becoming the first woman to rule alone. Young, fierce, and determined, she seeks to lead her people with wisdom. But power is never given freely. The Council of Elders, men who believe a woman should never rule without a husband, secretly plot against her. They want her replaced, by marriage or by force. When an assassin strikes within the palace walls and whispers of treachery grow louder, Nyah realizes she is surrounded by enemies. She must fight not just for her throne, but for her life. In a world where power is stolen, and loyalty is rare, she must prove that a queen is not just made by birth, but by fire and blood. The great halls of Zambura's palace had never held such silence. The air was thick with expectation, the flickering torches casting long shadows across the royal throne. At the center of it all stood Queen Nyah, her back straight, her gaze unflinching as she prepared for her coronation. Dressed in royal gold and deep red, the colors of Zambura's warrior queens of old, she exuded the strength of her ancestors. But the weight of the moment was heavy. She could feel it in the eyes of the Council of Elders, seated before her, their aged faces hard with disapproval. These were the men who had advised her father, the late King Jaba, for decades. And now, they did not want her here. She heard the murmurs in the corners of the palace, the whispers of servants and noblemen alike, a woman alone? Without a husband? The gods will curse us. She should marry immediately. The throne is no place for a queen without a king. She will not last long. Nyah clenched her fists. She would last. She would rule. As the royal priest stepped forward with the crown of Zambura, the sacred symbol of power, her heartbeat steadied. This moment was hers. The crown was placed upon her head, and the room erupted in the traditional chant. Long live the ruler of Zambura! But there was no joy in the voices of the council. Only duty. And in their eyes, she saw something dangerous, a silent rebellion, already brewing. She was queen, but she was not safe. The Grand Council chamber was filled with the scent of burning incense, the air thick with the weight of tradition. Queen Nyah sat at the head of the long ebony table, her hands resting firmly on the arms of her gilded throne. The Council of Elders sat before her, their expressions unreadable, their stiff postures betraying their unease. This was her first official meeting as ruler of Zambura. It was meant to be a display of power, a declaration that she was not just a placeholder on the throne, but a leader in her own right. But the elders had other plans. Your Majesty, Elder Obe began, his voice smooth but sharp, we welcome you to your first council session. It is our duty to guide you, as we did your father before you. But as you know, no queen has ever ruled Zambura without a king by her side. Nyah did not flinch. She had expected this. She had memorized every historical instance of female rulers being forced into marriages of political convenience. I am aware, she said evenly. But that is the past. I am the ruler of Zambura, and I shall lead without the need for a husband. A murmur spread across the table, some elders exchanging glances. Elder Jabari, the most outspoken among them, leaned forward. The kingdom needs stability, my queen. A strong hand beside you. Without a king, the people may doubt your reign. Nyah's gaze sharpened. The people do not doubt me. You do. The room grew tense. The elders were not used to being challenged so directly, especially not by a queen they still saw as a mere girl, unfit for rule. We only advise what is best for the kingdom, Elder Obe continued, his voice measured. If you were to consider marriage, it would solidify your rule. It would bring strength. Nyah inhaled deeply. They wanted her bound to a man, controlled through tradition. I will not marry for power, she said, her voice steady. If I am not strong enough to rule alone, then I do not deserve the throne. The chamber fell into silence. She had drawn the line. But she could see it in their eyes, they were not finished with their games. As the meeting ended and the elders filed out, a servant girl approached her, a folded parchment in her trembling hands. Your Majesty, this was left in your chambers," she whispered. Nyah unfolded the parchment. The ink was dark, the handwriting unfamiliar. "They will not stop. Watch your back, my queen. Even the walls have ears." Her grip tightened around the paper. The game had begun. Night had settled over Zambura's palace, but Queen Nyah found no peace in its embrace. The flickering torches cast shadows along the stone corridors, and every sound, every distant footstep, felt like a whisper of danger. The letter in her hands was a warning, but from whom? Someone inside these walls wanted her to know that she was being watched. Determined, she turned to her most trusted ally, General Masai, the commander of the royal guards. He was a man of few words, his loyalty unquestionable. "Someone left this in my chambers," she told him, handing over the note. Masai read it carefully before folding it. "A coward's message," he muttered. "If they had the courage to move against you, they wouldn't be hiding in the dark." Nyah nodded, but deep inside, she knew this was only the beginning. The next morning, as she prepared to address the royal court, she found it. Carved into the heavy wooden door of her chambers, deep enough to splinter the wood, were the words, "A throne without a king will burn." Nyah's breath caught in her throat. This was no warning, this was a threat. The message was clear. If she did not marry, if she did not yield, they would come for her throne. But fear was a stranger to her heart. She would not be intimidated. Later that day, as she sat upon the throne to discuss matters of state, she noticed the elders speaking in hushed tones. Something had shifted. She could feel it in the air, an unspoken alliance forming before her eyes. Her suspicions were confirmed when the doors swung open and a royal messenger stepped forward. He bowed, then read from a sealed parchment. "The Council of Elders has invited Prince Azu of the Western Kingdom to court, to discuss the future of Zambura's throne." Nyah's fingers curled around the arms of her throne. They had made their move. Azu. A name she had hoped to never hear again. A name that meant trouble. The grand hall of Zambura's palace was filled with tension so thick it felt like a storm on the horizon. The Council of Elders sat in their usual places, their faces unreadable, their silence speaking louder than words. Queen Nyah sat upon her throne, her expression calm, but her heart steady like a warrior before battle. The sound of boots echoed down the marble floors, the heavy doors swinging open to reveal Prince Azu. He entered with the confidence of a man who had already claimed victory. Dressed in royal red and gold, his tall, broad frame exuded power. He walked like a conqueror, his steps slow, deliberate. Behind him, his soldiers stood at attention, their presence a clear message. Nyah had known Azu once, when they were both children visiting neighboring courts. But time had hardened him, and the man standing before her now was not the playful boy she remembered. He stopped before the throne and bowed, not out of respect, but out of performance. "Queen Nyah," Azu said, his voice deep and smooth. "I come with a gift." At his signal, one of his men stepped forward, carrying an ornate wooden chest. He placed it before Nyah, then stepped back. The queen glanced at Masai, who nodded before opening it. Inside was a golden crown, one meant for a king. Nyah's eyes flickered back to Azu. "And what do you expect in return?" Azu smiled, stepping closer. "The throne does not belong to a woman alone, Nyah. We both know this. Marry me, and we will rule together. Zambura will have a king, and you will have the power you desire." The Council of Elders remained silent. Not one of them objected. This was their plan all along. Nyah leaned forward, resting her hands upon the throne. Her expression did not change, but her voice was sharper than the tip of a blade. "You assume that I need you." Azu's smile remained, but something flickered in his eyes. "It is not about need," he countered. "It is about destiny. You rule a kingdom built by kings. The people will never accept you without one. But with me beside you, they will worship you as they do the sun itself." Nyah let out a soft breath, tilting her head. "And if I refuse?" Azu's smile widened, but it did not reach his eyes. Then I will take what is mine. By other means. The threat hung in the air like the sharp scent of blood before battle. The council of elders shifted in their seats, their loyalty already wavering. Nyah sat back, her fingers tightening against the throne's carved arms. This was not just a proposal. This was a declaration of war. Night had fallen over Zambura, but Queen Nyah found no peace beneath its darkened sky. She stood alone on her balcony, the city stretching out before her, torches flickering like distant stars. The air was warm, but a chill had settled deep in her bones. Prince Azu's arrival had changed everything. She had known the Council of Elders would oppose her rule, but now they had given her a rival, a usurper, wrapped in the illusion of a marriage proposal. The people of Zambura respected Azu's lineage. If he claimed the throne, many would support him. And then there was his threat. He had not come to ask. He had come to take. A soft knock sounded at her chamber door. Nyah turned as General Masai entered, his expression grim. The council met in secret after the court session, he said. They are pushing for an official announcement. They want you to accept Azu's proposal. Nyah clenched her jaw. Of course they do. Masai hesitated, then added, it gets worse. Azu did not come alone. His men have been seen moving through the city, speaking to the merchants, the soldiers, the nobles. He is planting roots here, preparing for something. Nyah exhaled slowly. He was buying loyalty. She turned away, her fingers pressing against the cold stone railing. She could not let him win. We need to act before he does, she said. The people love me, but love is not enough. If Azu convinces them that I am weak. A sudden crash rang from the hallway outside. The doors burst open, and a figure dressed in black lunged toward her. Nyah reacted instantly. She ducked just as a blade sliced through the air, missing her throat by inches. Masai roared, drawing his sword. But the assassin was quick. He pivoted, striking at Nyah again. She was faster. Nyah grabbed the dagger hidden in the folds of her robe, twisting away from the attack. With a swift movement, she plunged the blade into the assassin's side. A sharp gasp left his lips before he staggered back. Masai finished him with one clean strike, his sword flashing in the dim torchlight. The assassin collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Silence. Nyah's breath came fast, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Slowly, she stepped forward, pulling the mask from the assassin's face. He was young, no older than 20. His lifeless eyes stared back at her, and on his wrist, she saw it. A golden emblem. Azu's crest. Rage burned through her. This was no coincidence. There was no warning. This was war. The assassin's body was still warm when Queen Nyah stepped over him, her fingers gripping the bloodied dagger. The rage inside her burned hotter than any fear. Azu had sent this man. There was no doubt now. Masai, his sword still in hand, watched her closely. We need to act, my queen. Nyah turned to him, her mind racing. If she accused Azu openly, the council would demand proof. They would twist her claims, call her weak, and claim that she was only seeking an excuse to drive Azu away. No. She would not fall into their trap. She would set one of her own. The next morning, the grand court was summoned. The nobles and elders sat in their ceremonial robes, their faces carefully neutral. But she could see it, their loyalties shifting, their expectations heavy. They wanted her to bow. Instead, she stood before them with the assassin's mask in her hands. Last night, I was attacked in my own chambers. Gasps rippled through the court. Nyah let the moment hang in the air before she continued. A coward sent an assassin to kill me in the dark, to strike fear into my heart. She stops, her gaze scanning through the elders' faces. But I am not afraid, she continued, voice steady. Whoever sent this assassin has made a grave mistake. She tossed the mask onto the floor. From this day forth, I will not tolerate treachery. The elders whispered among themselves, glancing at Azu, who merely smirked. He thought he had won. Nyah had just made her first move. The court had barely settled from the shock of Nyah's announcement when the doors swung open, and Prince Azu strode forward like he already owned the throne. The audacity of it made Nyah's blood boil. The elders straightened in their seats, their faces betraying neither approval nor discontent, but she could feel their anticipation. They were waiting. Waiting for her to break. Azu bowed slightly, just enough to appear respectful. Queen Nyah, he said smoothly. You have suffered a terrible attack. I am relieved to see you unharmed. Liar. Nyah did not respond, her silence sharpening the tension in the air. Azu stepped closer, his voice dropping. It seems the people of Zambura grow uneasy. They wonder if their queen is truly safe. If she is truly strong enough to lead alone. And there it was. The real attack. I have come to offer a solution. Azu spread his hands, his voice carrying through the chamber. Zambura needs stability, and I am willing to stand beside you. As your husband. As your king. The elders nodded approvingly, their trap set. Nyah forced herself to remain still. She could hear the whispers already. If she refused, they would say she was selfish, reckless, unfit to rule. If she accepted, she would never truly be queen. Azu took another step closer, his voice lower now, just for her. Choose wisely, Nyah. The people may love you, but they fear uncertainty. And when fear grows, power shifts. Nyah met his gaze, her fury contained behind cold, unblinking eyes. You are right, Prince Azu, she said finally, her voice calm. Zambura does need stability. Which is why I must ask, what sort of king sends assassins before his wedding? Gasps filled the hall. The accusation was out. The trap had snapped shut. Azu stiffened for only a second before he smiled again, though his eyes no longer held amusement. Assassins? My queen, that is a bold claim. Nyah stepped forward, closing the space between them. Then let's speak the truth, Azu. Do you deny that the man who tried to kill me wore your crest? The room fell into a thick silence. Azu's jaw tensed, but he did not falter. Perhaps a rogue warrior sought to dishonor my name. You and I both know that enemies move in the shadows. A clever evasion. But Nyah was not finished. Then if you have no part in this, you will not object to me investigating further, she said, turning to the elders. Let the court witness my decision. I will not be forced into a marriage out of fear. The elders murmured among themselves. This was not what they had planned. Azu's smile did not fade, but his fingers curled into a fist. She had denied him in front of the council, in front of the people. This battle was not over. But the war had begun. The council chamber had emptied, but Queen Nyah remained seated on her throne, her mind sharpening like a blade. She had won this battle, publicly humiliating Azu in front of the elders had bought her time. But time was not safe. Azu would strike back. And she needed to strike first. She turned to General Masai, who stood at her side like a shadow. Someone within my council is working against me, she said. Find them. Masai nodded, his expression dark. I already have a suspect. Nyah raised a brow. Masai continued, Elder Obe has been meeting privately with Azu's men. I had my guards watch him. He leaves the palace after our meetings and always returns before dawn. He is feeding Azu our plans. Nyah's hands clenched. Obe. One of the oldest and most powerful elders in the council. A man who had served her father for years. A man who was now betraying her. Later that night. The moon was high when Elder Obe entered his chambers, his steps slow, his mind likely filled with the whispers of treason. He never saw Nyah waiting in the shadows. When he turned, she was there, sitting in his chair, her fingers resting lightly on the dagger in her lap. You serve me by day, Nyah said, her voice quiet, deadly. And by night, you serve my enemy. Tell me, Obe, how does it feel to betray your queen?" Obey staggered back, eyes wide. "My queen, I..." "Do not lie to me," Nyah interrupted, rising to her feet. "I know everything." Ob's breath came fast. He knew he had nowhere to run. Nyah took a slow step forward. "Tell me, Obe, what did Azu offer you? Power? Gold? Did he promise you a place beside him when he takes my throne?" Obe swallowed hard, his hands shaking. "My queen, I only..." Nyah struck before he could finish. Her dagger slammed into the wooden table between them, the blade sinking deep. Obe flinched. "You are no longer part of this council," Nyah said coldly. "And by dawn, the people will know you as what you truly are, a traitor." She turned, already knowing that Masai and the guards outside would handle the rest. This was only the first traitor to fall. The air was thick with the scent of burning wood and blood. War had come to Zambura. Before dawn, Prince Azu made his final move. His men, hired warriors from the Western Kingdom, had infiltrated the city under the cover of night. By sunrise, the palace gates were under siege. Queen Nyah stood at the balcony of her war chambers, watching as flames licked the horizon. The city she had vowed to protect was under attack, and she knew this was the moment everything had been leading to. "Azu has declared himself king," General Masai reported, his voice grave. "He rides with his army. They will reach the palace before nightfall." Nyah turned to her general, her expression cold, unshaken. "Then we will meet him with steel and fire." The gates of the palace shuddered under the weight of the battering ram. The soldiers of Zambura, outnumbered but loyal, stood firm. Then the gates splintered open. Azu's warriors poured in, blades gleaming in the morning light. The courtyard erupted into chaos as swords clashed, arrows rained down, and the screams of battle filled the air. Masai led the charge, his sword cutting through the first wave of invaders. For every man they struck down, another took his place. Nyah stood at the top of the steps, watching as the battle unfolded before her. And then, through the dust and chaos, she saw him. Prince Azu. He strode through the battlefield like a conqueror, his black and gold armor untouched by the bloodshed around him. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, the battle no longer belonged to their armies. It belonged to them. Azu climbed the palace steps, unsheathing his blade as he approached her. "It doesn't have to be this way, Nyah," he called over the sounds of war. "Surrender, and I will spare your life. You can rule beside me, or you can die at my feet." Nyah laughed softly, shaking her head. "You still don't understand," she said, drawing her sword. "This is my throne. And I will never bow to you." Their blades clashed with a force that shook the stone beneath them. Azu was strong, but Nyah was faster. She dodged his strike, twisting to land a sharp cut across his arm. He grunted but recovered quickly, his next blow nearly taking her off balance. The fight moved across the palace steps, each strike ringing like thunder. Azu's attacks became desperate, his movements wild. He had expected her to be weak, to be easy to defeat. He had been wrong. With one final, decisive strike, Nyah drove her sword through his chest. Azu staggered, his mouth opening in shock. His sword slipped from his fingers, clattering to the ground. Nyah stepped closer, her eyes locked onto his. "You should have bowed." She pulled her sword free, and Prince Azu fell to his knees, before collapsing at her feet. The battlefield fell silent. The soldiers who had once fought for Azu lowered their weapons, seeing their leader slain. General Masai stepped forward, his voice carrying over the palace grounds. "The false king is dead." A roar erupted from Nyah's army, the sound of victory shaking the heavens. Nyah turned, her gaze sweeping over what remained of the palace. The fires could be extinguished, the walls rebuilt. But Zambura had survived. And now, it belonged to her alone. The palace stood scarred but unbroken. Smoke curled from the torches as the last remnants of battle were cleared. The false king was dead, and his rebellion had been crushed. Yet Queen Nyah's fight was not over. She sat upon her throne, her blood-stained sword resting against its side. Before her knelt the remaining members of the Council of Elders, men who had plotted against her, men who had conspired with Azu to steal her throne. The silence in the grand hall was suffocating. Finally, Elder Jabari, the one who had spoken so confidently before, lifted his head. "Your Majesty," he said, voice trembling. "The war is over. You betrayed me." Nyah's voice was calm, but the weight behind it sent a chill through the chamber. "You called yourselves my advisors, yet you plotted my downfall. You conspired with a usurper. You sat in this very hall and demanded that I surrender my rule to a man who sought to kill me." She stood slowly, her piercing gaze sweeping over them. "What should I do with you?" None of them answered. She took a step forward. "The law of Zambura is clear. Treason against the crown is punishable by death." Several of the elders visibly trembled. Nyah tilted her head. "Yet I am not my father. And I will not rule through fear." A pause. The air in the room shifted. "The Council of Elders is hereby dissolved," Nyah declared. "Your power is gone. Your influence, erased. From this day forward, Zambura will not be ruled by the whispers of old men who cower in the shadows. I alone am sovereign." Gasps rippled through the court. Never before had a ruler stood without the council. Never before had a queen ruled alone. Elder Jabari's face paled. "But the traditions can be rewritten." Nyah turned, addressing the court. "Zambura has suffered under the weight of old laws. Laws that said a woman could not rule without a man. Laws that nearly destroyed us. Today, I changed that." She raised her chin, her voice clear, unbreakable. "From this day forth, no queen shall ever be forced to share her throne. The rule of Zambura will not be decided by gender, but by strength, by wisdom, by leadership." The room erupted into stunned whispers. Nyah turned back to the elders. "Leave this place. Your time is over." One by one, they rose and left the chamber, stripped of their power, their ambitions shattered. Nyah watched them go, knowing that this was the true victory. The war for Zambura had not been fought with swords alone. It had been fought with will, with resilience, with fire. And she had won. Alone, but unshaken. In the years that followed, Queen Nyah's reign became legend. She rebuilt the palace, not as a monument to the kings before her, but as a symbol of change. She established schools for the young, training both boys and girls to lead. She ensured that power was earned, not inherited. And as time passed, the people no longer whispered about whether a woman could rule. They only whispered about the queen who had stood against an empire and won. And her name, Nyah the Unbroken, was never forgotten. The end.